Geek Out!
Starring Bryan Cranston.
I haven't seen that.
I never actually saw Trumbo.
I thought about it. He wrote Johnny Got His Gun, right?
He wrote Spartacus.
Johnny Got His Gun, which is the inspiration for the song One by Metallica.
Oh. I think I probably want to see Hidden Figures, and of course The Founder comes out on Friday.
The Founder. Yeah, I want to see Hidden Figures.
John Wick comes out in just under a month.
February 10th, right?
Yeah.
There's some, I
I think that's the same weekend as Lego Batman.
Oh, Lego Batman. Yeah.
Apparently there's a new TV spot for it that Ken texted me earlier, and he was like, hey, how spoiler-free do you want to be for Lego Batman? And I was like, part of me was like, well, it's Lego Batman. But the other part of me was like, but I do hate spoilers. So that's what I wrote back, and he was like, okay, don't watch the new TV spots. It gives away all the good a lot of good stuff. And I was like, okay. I mean, how do you know that without seeing the movie already? But okay.
Fair enough. Hey, welcome to another installment of Catching Up. I'm Sam.
I'm Chris.
And this week we've got an interview with Kaare Andrews. He's here to promote his Image comic series, Renato Jones, The 1%, which is out now. You can get that first volume that collects that season 1 arc. He's also written Spider-Man Reign for Marvel. He's done quite a bit of artwork. He's over for them. He's what's that? Iron Fist. Iron Fist: The Living Weapon. Of course, that comes back the beginning of the summer with Iron Fists. If you haven't heard of Iron Fist, in 2 months you will.
Yeah.
When he's on Netflix and just everywhere. And so we touch on all that. We touch on Kaare working on the ABCs of Death. We touch on the Vancouver television scene, which because all the CW stuff films there.
Yeah,
because it's where the X-Files filmed.
Yeah.
Back in the day.
Yeah, before they relocated to Los Angeles.
Yeah,
and the show suffered because there's a clear drop-off point. Like X-Files worked best when it was filming in like the Vancouver area.
Yeah.
And then the movie came out and it was like, cool. And then they were like, let's keep going. And David Duchovny's like, let's film in Los Angeles. And it's like, oh, well, it's okay. Anyway, so without much further ado, let's just get to this interview, eh? That's what you came here to listen to. That's what we came here to listen to. Chris, roll the thing. Joining us this week, we have comic book writer, artist, and filmmaker Kaare Andrews on the show. He's here to talk about his Image comic series, Renato Jones, The 1%. He's also done Spider-Man Reign over for Marvel and Iron Fist, The Living Weapon. Kaare, thanks for coming on the show.
It is my pleasure.
So in Iron Fist, in Renato Jones, in Spider-Man Reign, we're seeing all these protagonists that are kind of stuck in the tedium and ennui of like their daily lives, and something kind of gets them to break free. What is it about that kind of thread that really draws you in all these stories?
My world revealed. I'm often, I feel like that is kind of my life mostly. It's this trapped in despondent melancholia until you answer the call and launch yourself at the world. That's kind of how I sit, really, as a individual man and an individual artist, and and this insurmountable world ahead of me. I'm drawn to those characters probably mostly because I feel like I'm one of them.
You mentioned in the foreword of Renato Jones that there's kind of the making art is that your way to kind of to fight entropy, to fight death?
Well, I really think that that entropy is death. So there's either pushing forward or there's death. There's no, they say rest in peace, and I think that's very appropriate. Once you stop growing and learning and achieving and changing, the minute you stop, you start dying. I don't believe in breaks. I don't believe in taking moments to regroup. I think I think the best break from doing one thing is to do another thing. So I just think you need to strive ahead and and take what you can out of this life with everything you have, because when you stop doing that, you're already fading away.
Now, Renato Jones, I mean, it's one, it's your first creator-owned book, and secondly, I feel like it comes from a very reactive place that, given the most recent election cycle, maybe stands as relevant and true as ever. Can you kind of go into the origins of the book?
Yeah, I never intended it to be quite so topical. When I came up with the character, I had already been dealing with a wealth-fueled superhero with Iron Fist for a couple of years, or a year and a half anyways. And when I did that book, I wrote, penciled, inked, colored 12 issues in a row before, which is surprisingly, no one else in the history of Marvel Comics has ever done that, which is kind of strange. But I felt like I had kind of achieved some sort of a personal landmark. And I realized that I no longer had any excuses not to do a creator-owned book. That just seemed like the next phase of my comic book career. For many years, I had been doing film projects. I also do some directing as well, in place of creator-owned comics. And I just felt like the time is now. I need to do this for myself, and I need to grow as an artist. And whenever I do art, whether it's writing or drawing or whatever, it's a combination of the accumulation of my experience, my life experience, mixed with the moment I'm in at that time. So I didn't mean it to be, but in a way, it's I have a bit of a wealth trilogy going on right now with Iron Fist, Danny Rand, a billionaire superhero. I have Renato Jones, who is a billionaire superhero of another bent. And then in Dark Horse Presents, I'm doing this book, or a character called the Black Sinister, which is another billionaire superhero of another bent. So it's I have kind of a bit of a wealth trilogy going on. But specifically with Renato Jones, I took a look around the world around me and realized that bank robbers didn't make sense. And the true villains of this world, our world, are corporations or dictatorships, possibly terrorists, or rich people hiding behind wealth. And I thought, who would be the most fun? I wanted to create a kind of a fun book. What would be the most fun to see taken down? And terrorism, that's not necessarily a fun topic, and that's already been done very well throughout all media. Dictatorships, again, I didn't think it would be as fun. So that's left with corporations or individuals, and as much fun as it would be to take on Coca-Cola, there's not really, you can't, because it's this never-ending snake of CEOs or whatnot. So I thought it'd be the most fun to take on the kind of evil that hides behind wealth, like real people,
Now, with Renato Jones, like you were saying, the title character, he himself is a member of the 1%, and he's also taking on the 1%. Was that what was it that made it important that there had to be kind of a sense of justice or self-correction within that part of the population?
Well, again, it was real world response. Like I really believe that super wealth is one of the world's real superpowers. And it's not that rich people are evil. Many people with money are not, and they do good things, great things. But there is, if you are an evil person, it's very easy to hide behind that wealth. And if you look at our real world, who can get at you when you hide behind wealth? No one really. Maybe only someone who is one of their own could ever, go beneath the veil, walk amongst them, a sheep in wolf's clothing. But even sheep have teeth. And I've always loved that quote, and that was kind of a bit of inspiration for the book. And I thought it was more interesting to have a character who he assumes the identity of someone of the super rich to then hunt them down. So he himself isn't of them, but he hides amongst them. Again, a sheep in wolf's clothing. And I've always loved that imagery of a sheep with teeth.
Well, there's kind of, now that you're mentioning the hiding in plain sight or hiding in sheep or wolf hiding in sheep's clothing. I was thinking in Renato Jones, we've got the title character that's very much kind of uncomfortable being a part of that society with Iron Fist, the living weapon. You had Danny Rand that was just so like uncomfortable being Danny Rand. It was when he was tapping into the powers of Kunlun and the Iron Fist that he really came alive, especially like in that first issue where there's that beautiful montage you put together of him just going through the day, and he isn't like actually active until he's fighting helicopters on the side of a building. And so what is it about, and will Black Sinister similarly be kind of uncomfortable in his own skin within that Wealth trilogy unless he's Black Sinister himself?
Well, Black Sinister is a special character. So for Danny Rand, when I approached Danny Rand, I looked at him and his history as a whole and just asked myself, like, who is this guy? And I felt in many ways the core of his character wasn't as clearly defined as, say, a Batman or a Superman or a Spider-Man. And I thought that's what contributed to his kind of second tier status. I mean, not to be mean about it, but like he has never been embraced. I think he will now with the Netflix show, but he hadn't been embraced in a way that was as welcoming as a character with a clear cut core to his character. And I think part of that reason is his origin story was so different than how he'd been portrayed, and he'd been portrayed in many different ways. And I went back to that origin story, which is kind of like probably the darkest origin story of any Marvel character, at least. Let alone, I think, one of the darkest origin stories of any character in comics. It's a little boy whose parents are betrayed on a mountain, and his father is thrown off a cliff by his business partner, and his business partner right then and there tries to basically propose to his mother after that. And when she turns him away, then he leaves him to die, and she gets eaten by wolves in front of him, and he's only like 10 years old. I thought that was really dark and really and then in that first origin story, he becomes a superpowered person, not to make the world a better place and not to right the wrongs. He becomes a superpowered kung fu weapon to hunt down and kill one ordinary man. That's a pretty dark tale. And I thought for Danny Rand, I called him, maybe cutely, but Bruce Wayne without a plan. He had all this wealth and all this power and all this ability, and he harnessed that power to take vengeance on one ordinary man. With Renato Jones, I looked at it in terms of a different way. The closest comparison is probably Batman. Like, Batman was a billionaire child with billionaire parents, from a billionaire family, and they were gunned down by a common street thug. And kind of much like Iron Fist, Batman used his billions of dollars as a superpower and trained himself to become this perfect dark weapon against street crime, against poverty. And it was really like, it's class warfare, really. And when that character was created, I think the world viewed the poor as a danger and as something that needed to be controlled, or else they would be overrun, which is not today. Today, the poor are jailed. They're institutionalized. They don't have homes. They're disempowered to an extent we've never seen before, at least never seen before in modern times. I mean, obviously, in other times, it's different. But in our world, the true evil is, can be found in people who hide behind wealth. And so Danny Rand, he's a guy who uses his powers to help people. Renato Jones isn't interested in helping people. He's interested in making the rich pay. He's interested in making people who hide behind wealth pay for what they've done, and not in terms of revenge. He's not avenging the loss of his parents or his mother or his father or any of that. He has assumed the identity of one of them, and he is righting the wrongs on a basis of almost a moral code. Like, if you are evil and hide behind wealth, disregarding your connection to Renato Jones himself, he has taken it upon himself to even the world, to even the score. And then the Black Sinister, he is just a sociopathic billionaire who controls his city through crazed craziness and wealth, and he's almost a villain. So it's kind of those three aspects. You have a billionaire who helps people, a billionaire who wants to make things right, and a billionaire who tries to control his city through his super wealth.
That was one of my favorite things about reading Renato Jones, especially in the first issue, is that he'll go. I like that he goes so far that when he is playing the 1% Renato Jones, like he plays up like the asshole factor huge, you know? So like I remember reading the first issue and I was like, wait, this is supposed to be, you know, and what I kept like, because Bruce Wayne doesn't really do that a lot. I mean, Bruce Wayne always has a sense of honor about him, even when he is billionaire Bruce Wayne, like, you know, it's not out, you know, it's not alcohol, it's apple juice kind of thing. But it reminded me of kind of Diego de la Vega, Zorro, you know, because Zorro, his alter ego, he wouldn't play up kind of like the 1% thing, but he would act like, you know, anytime someone threw him a sword, he would play the coward card. And so like there's a clear difference. Like you're like, you know, when you're reading that first issue, especially or when I was at least with Renato Jones, you know, I thought that was really interesting seeing him really kind of dive into that first, you know, that 1% kind of attitude. And then he puts the mask on and just unleashes, you know, terror on the 1%.
Yeah, I mean, in many ways, like I said, he's a sheep in wolf's clothing. So his identity is Renato Jones. That's not who he is. That's a role he plays, and he plays it every day. And I think he's closer to himself in the Renato Jones character. But that's an obligation. That's not actually himself. He's in many ways, he's a man who is lost, and he, you know, lost in his own identity and lost in who he was. He would have died if he didn't assume this other identity, and that had a price to it. And the price was to dole out restitution in the name of a young boy named Renato Jones who was killed by evil and wealth. And so I love characters with identity issues. I probably have some of my own that I'm not totally in touch with, but that's the kind of character I love. I love loners with identity issues. So, you know, I'm a comic book creator who works in my basement by myself half the time, and half the time I'm a director of film and television who is with a crew of 100 people. And I love the dichotomy of those worlds. And, you know, I often feel like I'm, you know, and we all do, I guess. We all take on different identities, but I feel like I'm 3 different people at any time.
You touch on the film stuff. We're all pretty big horror fans here. I got to know Kaare. What was it like working on the ABCs of Death on that V segment?
It was awesome. When I started making films, I started making shorts, and I started writing and directing my own shorts, and that led to my career. But in my directing career, I haven't had the chance to write and direct a large project, like a feature film. And so the 2 features that I have directed were kind of directed for hire. The scripts were there before me, and you know, I've made I've had my own scripts almost get made many times, and I'm sure it'll happen at some point. But the ABCs of Death was kind of the first opportunity for me to write and direct something of my own. And even though the budget was very low and the parameters are quite tight, it felt so close to those earlier days of short filmmaking that I just loved it. I embraced it completely. And so I'm still waiting for that opportunity to do that in the feature film world or the television world. And I know it's going to happen. It almost happened again just not too long ago. So I always have a couple of projects in the works that threaten to go, and a couple of them are my own, and we'll see. And like when I grew up, here's the weird thing. When I grew up, I thought I didn't see any difference between comics and animation and films and movie making or toys. And it wasn't until you got older that the world told you, oh, these are different things, and maybe you can do one of them, maybe, but they're different. And you know, that's a lie. I decided on comic books first. I broke into there, and I said, well, if I can do that, why can't I do the other things? And so I did. I pursued filmmaking while I was doing comic books, and you know, I was able to create a career doing both things. And I'm now looking for a project to merge those 2 different medias together in a way that I haven't. I've kept them very separate. Like I've had no integration with my comic book career, my film career. I built them up separately. A lot of people in the film world have no idea to do comics. A lot of people in comics have no idea to I direct. So I'm looking for a project that I can really like push those two worlds together now. And I feel now that I've done some, I'm in a place in both careers that they can withstand each other, kind of like merging back together. And I just want to like do that. That's my next goal, I think.
Was that kind of the push to go creator-owned in the first place? I mean, every issue, you proudly proclaim, and rightfully so, that you own Renato Jones. There's a singularity of vision there. Was that kind of the idea that you would kind of maintain that and not necessarily write for screen or write these comics as kind of massive printed serialized treatments, but the idea that you would kind of maintain that singularity of vision with your filmmaking endeavors as well?
Well, it's more like when I first broke into comic books, I had every intention of writing and drawing a mainstream superhero title, and then doing a creator-owned book, and then writing and drawing a mainstream superhero title, and bouncing back and forth between those two worlds. And that was before I ventured off into the film world. So the film world really took place of the creator-owned comic book goals of mine, and I would write and draw a comic book, and then jump and direct a film or write a screenplay, and then back to comic books. And it wasn't until I finished my Iron Fist book that I realized it had been a long time since I made that promise to myself, and it really was time to do a creator-owned book, just to feel like I had no more excuses there. I had done a lot of things at that point, and it was time for me to do that. When I do a comic book like Renato Jones, I feel like I know when a comic book is just a pitch for a movie, and I feel like it hurts the comic book. And that's one reason why I've kept them separate. I didn't want to corrupt my comic book experience with chasing something else. And I think some people do chase films by doing comic books, but why not just do a film then? To me, that's always been the better way to do it. Like, just do something directly. Like, don't try to order ice cream by driving to another state and going to the gas station, and then it's like buying ice cream in the gas station. It's like, just get some ice cream. So I don't know, that's probably a poor analogy, but
I got it.
Yeah. It's like buying milk to make ice cream instead of just getting ice cream.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of, or I don't know. It's maybe it's like more like buying ice cream to then extract the milk out of it and have a glass of milk. Like, it's like they're different things. So when I do a book like Renato Jones, it's not like super. I don't do it to then adapt it. I don't do it to make it into something else. But if it happens, it happens. I'd love for it to happen, but it would be challenging to do it. It's adult material. It's super violent. It's super topical. It's super visceral. It's super edgy in many ways. It's not mainstream, major network television per se. It would be an interesting project if it ever happened. But I don't do one to chase the other. So if they merge, amazing. I would love that. But I don't want to corrupt myself as a creator and lose. I create to create, and I don't want to. They're not stopgaps to another medium. The worst thing. Here's what's horrible. I think comic books, this industry in comic books, I love it. It's amazing. I've read comic books my whole life, but often we judge success by, if one comic book was taken by someone else and turned into another media. Like, Badger Man was a successful comic book because David Fincher made a movie. He took that from Joe Man and he made his own movie of it in a different media. What does that have to do with the success of Badger Man? If Badger Man is a good comic book, it's successful. Like The Walking Dead, before The Walking Dead was a TV show, was a great comic book. You can't judge one title by the success or failure of how it adapts into another media by different people other than the creator. And I think we just have this kind of insecurity in this industry. It's so small that sometimes we look for validation from other people. And to me, that's the wrong way to do it. Like, Hellboy was amazing before it was a Del Toro movie. It's an amazing comic book still by Mike Mignola. It doesn't need it doesn't need the other to be good in itself. And I just always want to make good comics.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things though that we were talking about off mic was that Renato Jones, and I think it's a credit to your art style, like, is so cinematic though. Like you can definitely see
it's very kinetic.
The action, the way the action moves, and not even just the action, the way the shadow plays. The black goes from black and white, the color, and like you said, you do it all. And every episode, whenever I talk about some kind of comic, when someone does everything, I always call it like the Barry Windsor Smith effect, because like he was the first guy ever, Weapon X. I was like, this guy fucking did everything. He planted the tree to cut down the paper, and so like, but now I can say it's Kaare Andrews because I would get like images of me like, oh, that reminds me. And again, I know not a lot of artists like to talk about influences or whatnot, but like I would see it and be like, oh, that reminds me, like shades of like a Frank Miller thing here or Tim Sale thing here. Like how do you go about like a page layout for this? Because the page layouts in this comic book are fucking awesome,
and there's no restraint,
and they're so unique. And it might just be a blank page, or it might just be the onomatopoeia of blam, and then the characters in the letters here or there. Like is there a certain way you go about when you sit down to to draw?
Yeah, so I've always loved the writer artist, whether it's Jim Steranko or Frank Miller or Howard Chaykin or Will Eisner. Like, I think that comic books are the marriage of words and images, and when it's one person who does both, I think it just makes more pure comic books. So when you Barry Windsor it and you can do all the jobs yourself, I think it just becomes more pure. It becomes uncut. It's like a vision told. It's the definition of comic book through one hand. And how could that not be more pure? Like, I think sometimes you get a collaboration or a team that is so intrinsic to each other, like say a Claremont Byrne X-Men run or whatever, that they become sort of a singular person that does it. But I think it's most pure when it's one person. To me, it feels kind of like a fever dream when one guy does all those jobs. Like, it just, because the separation is so, there is no separation anymore. It's like the result is different. So that's always what I've been into and what I've wanted to do. That first year I broke into Marvel, I immediately pushed to start writing, and I was writing within that first year because that's just what I'm into. I often get asked I often get told and asked about the influence between my film and comic book work, because when I'm drawing a comic book, I would get told it's film-like, and when I'm directing, I often get told it's like it's kind of comic book-like, and I don't even know. Like, it must be, right, because those two worlds touch each other, but it's almost to this. I can't parse it out anymore. It's like, don't ask a fish about water. A fish knows nothing about water. It's just what I do. So if it feels a little filmic, it's probably because I direct films sometimes. So that's probably it. But I'm totally into like the one creator doing everything. Some of our best writers now used to draw. Rick Remender, Brian Michael Bendis, and some of our best artists, I think, should be writing. Like, I think we've compartmentalized the situation too much, too much these days. It's like it's so rewarding. I want more of my peers to join me and do both, because in the 80s that was the thing. The writer artist was the man, and we've gone through the age of the artist, and we're going through the age of the writer. I think it's the next is going to be again a return to the age of the writer artist.
Like Jake was kind of alluding to, you do a lot of experimental stuff with Renato Jones that you don't normally see in a comic book. What was it like? What was it like working on this series without editorial constraint, not being limited to like 20 pages of comic per month?
I forgot that was part of the question. Well, when I love the language of comic books, and I'm always looking for opportunities to use the specificity of comic books to do something that you couldn't do in a movie, or couldn't do in TV, or couldn't do in a book, like a novel. So I'm always looking for opportunities to experiment with visual storytelling and marry the word and the image in ways that I haven't seen before. And anytime I feel like I can do something that I've never seen before, I feel like so fulfilled, because I love the medium so much, and I want to push and experiment and try new things. And for me, when I'm doing comic books, when I kind of come across an idea that I haven't seen before, that's like, oh, I have to do that. I have to try that. And with Renato Jones specifically, at Marvel and DC right now, you're kind of limited to 20 pages, 20 story pages per month. And that's a hard 20. And if you need 22, you can maybe do it once or twice, maybe. But really, you need to stick to the 20 pages. They pay you per page, and they have budgets per book. But with Renato Jones, I get paid by the issue. And if I want to do 60 pages in one issue and 10 pages in the other issue, I can. So you get a lot more room to run around and try new things. And it's become a lot of double page spreads because that's something I can do in that book that I can't do in Marvel or DC. And it's fun to like try things, like try doing just I asked myself like, what if I had a book that was just white pages, just blank pages, the whole book? And that was a little too crazy, but it parsed down to an idea that I used in issue 5 where that became part of the vocabulary of that issue. Like I always, come up with these crazy concepts and then try to find a way to like integrate them into Renato Jones. And it's just fun. And part of how it works literally is I kind of in a Marvel style to myself, I plot out the issue and I plot out per page, and what goes on that page is probably like, a few beats. And then I just story tell with my pencil. And then I allow that writing with my pencil to rewrite the storytelling that the words told me to. So I try to like, I don't try to separate the processes. I try to like, it's more like waves against the ocean for me to finish an issue. It's not like box A, box B, box C done. It's like here's a pass with words, here's a pass with pencils, here's a pass with inks, here's a pass now with dialogue, and here's a pass with colors. And each stage I can redo the work in the other stage, or I can change things. It's a very fluid process, and that fluidity is the strength and the domain of doing the jobs yourself. Yeah, I mean, when you're a gear in a machine, when you're a component to a process, when you're part A of a 3 or 4 part machine, I think you work in fear a lot. Like, oh, if you fail at this job, your one job, you're going to let down the whole machine. All those other parts are going to stop. You'll jam up the machine. You better not fail. You better do things the right way and tried and true, and don't let down your editor, and don't let down your inkers, and don't let down your writers, and But when you are the machine, well, you better just do whatever you want. There's no failure anymore. You're just the machine. You can just drive. It's so like, that's comics to me. That's pure creativity.
Well, it's funny because like I always, anytime we have someone on who's an artist or a writer artist, I always am just so curious because I can't draw to save my life. And reading that forward to your book, my little like New Year's resolution that I made was like, I'm gonna learn how to draw this year. Like that's what I'm doing. And so I read your forward, and I was like, oh shit, he's talking to me. So in between every issue, I'm like drawing like, here's a circle, and here's where the shadows come from, and here's the lamp. But yeah, I mean, like, people, and I'm not just, kissing ass here, but like people definitely see that in a comic book. And I think also seeing like just one name on a comic, like, oh shit, this guy did everything, or, like you're saying, it does, you can see the fluidity in it because you are that one machine, that living weapon, bad pun or whatever, but like, going through and working on the comic and making it all come together. And that's just, I don't know, that's just, I think all of us, speak for all of us, like that's what we look for in a comic book creator or just someone who is creative. That idea of like like that no fear attitude or pushing the boundaries is huge. Like we always love that idea of someone who is not afraid to just push the envelope, because that's going to, help evolve the art form, whatever it is you're working on. And then that, also that idea of just that super creativity, like that never stop attitude. So I mean, that reading that forward was like a perfect way to dive into the book. Like it was just,
especially that bit about like, don't look for like likes and retweets for like to quantify your value. You matter.
Yeah, well, I think it's, social media has created this strange construct of, you're looking for mass validation from people. But if you, it's like, what is the end result? If you really want that mass validation, and your ice cream, well, you better be vanilla. Because if you're any other flavor, you're not going to get as many likes and retweets. And it's like if you put chocolate in it, well, some people hate chocolate. If you're strawberry ice cream, some people hate strawberry. If you're like a gourmet peanut butter caramel thing, like, oh my goodness, like you're going to get a lot of hate. But really, that individual voice, that unique voice, that signature voice, is really what it's all about. Like you don't want to become some bland, tasteless product that everyone kind of loves, but it doesn't really speak to anyone. Like I think it's almost in a strange way, it's the antithesis, the antithesis, and whatever it's like the anti-social media thing you're trying to do. You're trying to create a reaction that will generate as equal dislikes as likes, and that's art. That reaction to material. And I get tons of validation. I get tons of like, oh, this is amazing. But I get as many, this is horrible and this is awful with anything I do. And for me, that is actually the desired response. Sometimes it's hard to handle. It's like, well, that's the response you really want in this world. And I think it's great. It's great you're drawing again. Here's a funny thing. Like people ask me all the time, "Oh, when did you start drawing?" And I always answer, "Well, when did you stop?" Because everyone draws when they're a kid. Like everyone draws when they're a kid. Like everyone. Like if you put a pencil or something in a little kid's hand, they will start making marks on the wall, on the floor, on paper, whatever. Like they just want to create. Like it's part of our DNA. And then the weird thing is, most people stop. The majority of people stop, and they're shamed out of it. They're told they're not good enough, or they're embarrassed about it, or they're made fun of, or they're told there's no value in it. But there is. And if you look at human communication, well, not just before we had the written language, but before we had the verbal language, we were doing cave paintings on walls. Like there's something intrinsic about mark making that is part of the human experience that dates back, before we could even tell each other how we feel about life. And I think that's why we respond to art, visual communication. It's just it's intrinsic to our nature, and it's probably closer to our core emotional self than words or ideas, the coldness of logic. So that's probably, for me, that's why I love comics. It's that the mixture of ideas communicated through language, which does create higher thought patterns and you can break down the universe through words, but it's also the raw emotions of just mark making. A jagged line can create just as much feeling in your soul as a poem.
And it's most like primal, elementary nature.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's primal communication. It's like screaming at someone, or it can be like embracing someone. It's almost like the next step after you can either kill someone or make love to someone. What's the next step after that? Well, it's taking a stick and drawing an animal in the dirt. I think it's interesting to me.
Now, you did earlier invoke Renato, the 5th issue, which rounds out the first volume of Renato Jones of Season 1, which ends, without giving the game away, on a pretty big cliffhanger. What and when can we expect Season 2?
Well, I'm penciling issue 2 of Season 2 right now. It's not quite scheduled, but it will be scheduled very shortly. It'll be this year, most likely late spring. And I would say that Season 1 is about raising questions, and Season 2 is about giving answers. So we hit the ground running in Season 2. The first issue is probably the most spectacular and action-packed of any issue I've done, of Renato Jones in particular, but maybe even of any comic I've done. It's just jam-packed, full of visceral and visual action. And then we start answering all the questions that we raised in those first 5 issues of Season 1. And so it's really kind of a dual seasons. Season 1 and Season 2 go together like peanut butter and jam.
There was kind of, again, I don't want to give the game away, the first season of Renato Jones, the title character is pretty no holds barred.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like season 2 is going to quote Mr. Lagasse, kick things up a notch.
Yeah.
So, is it even possible for Renato to go even more no holds barred than he was in that first arc?
It is very possible. It's always to quote my Bliss character about wealth, there's always more. You always want more. There's always a way to get more. So yeah, there's more coming, and it's gonna be fun, I think.
Just real quick, how much fun is it to draw and write Wicked Awesome? Because he steals some of the show when he shows up with his dialogue and just his
everybody loves Dick.
Yeah, and his outfit and everything. When he showed up, I was like, oh fuck yes.
He's like, he's my response to in a very fun way. He's my response to this newer idea of superheroes. Like when I was a kid, superheroes were kind of moral people who did moral things, and they tried to take care of people they loved, and I learned how to be, I think, a good person through Spider-Man, or whatever. And in today's world, almost across the board, the most popular superheroes have become a little snarky. It's like have become a little. It's no longer like Superman isn't the modern superhero anymore. Like Superman was an immigrant who came to another country and showed them how to be better people. Like that used to be a superhero. In today's world, that superhero is someone who was already better than everyone else, and they just had to realize it. And the more they tell people that they're better than them, the more people love them. I'm looking right at Iron Man. I'm looking right at whoever that is. Like that journey today, that modern superhero experience has become not about becoming a better person, but just realizing you were already better to begin with. And I like those characters as much as anyone. I like those movies as much as anyone. I like it's fun to watch that kind of character on screen. But in many ways, it's like that's not fucking superheroes to me. Sorry, so drop that.
No, go for it. Yeah, go for it.
I have a different idea about things. Even though I write like super violent stories, and maybe I'm not about delivering moral messages at all, but it's a comment on the world. Like that Mr. Wicked Awesome is to me just a fun character to write. But he's a representation of that kind of a character that's ruling the pop culture right now. He's like my version of that snarky super human that didn't really work to get there. He just kind of like announces that he just realizes that he was better all along, and everyone loves him for it. So he's a fun character, man. And that name came from my older brother, who doesn't read comic books. He's a banker. He's like an investment broker, and he just made some joke about as a fun name, Mr. Wicked Awesome, and I was like, I'm gonna take that and use that. Like it just was like it just informed the character.
You had invoked Spider-Man earlier, Kaare. Your work kind of first got on our radar through Spider-Man Reign. I was just wondering if we could kind of if you can kind of tell how that story kind of coalesced.
Yeah, well, my favorite superhero of all time has always been Spider-Man. He was the character I grew up reading and loving, and when I broke into Marvel Comics, I was like Spider-Man's age, height, weight. In many ways, I felt like Spider-Man. And some of the first work I did was Spider-Man covers. And the first story I wrote for Marvel Comics was a Spider-Man tale. I wrote an issue or half an issue of Spider-Man Tangled Web, and I also wrote and drew manga Spider-Man for the Marvel Mangaverse. And it was, for me, that's like, he's just the character that I've always just connected with. That's the guy that I feel the closest affinity to, that kind of a character, that kind of a person. And so I immediately started pushing to write a Spider-Man book. And, Axel said, pitch me something. And I just kind of went through, just did a little thinking like, well, what kind of Spider-Man story hadn't been told yet? And really, every Spider-Man story had been told, but there hadn't really been any Spider-Man of the future stories besides, say, Spider-Man 2099.
Mhm.
And I thought, oh, well, there's a way in, and there's a way to pitch a book, and there's a way to like have it stand out, is to be kind of like a Spider-Man in the future. And the Marvel really latched onto it, and they really latched onto to like probably especially the way it was talked about was like the Dark Knight aspects of it, and it probably is a little closer to the Dark Knight than I had intended, but it definitely was a touchstone towards the book. But the cool thing about a character like Spider-Man is, even if you put him in that same situation as, like, say, Batman was in the Dark Knight, it's such a different character that the story itself can't help but be completely different because, of his social circumstances, his personality, his moral choices. Like he's always going to be a different. It was inherently going to be a different book, so it was just a chance to tell a story in the future, have it be the first miniseries that I wrote and drew and colored some of as well, and to just really get into that character that I felt I knew better than anyone, at least the heart of him. I felt like I knew as much, or if not better than anyone else.
Well, you create in that book one of my all-time favorite Spider-Man moments, which is when Jameson like comes to his door and is like, "We need a Spider-Man," and Peter Parker's like, "I don't do that shit anymore," and and then he leaves the box, the package for him, and it's the black mask, whatever, and he puts it on, and he goes out and just beats the shit out of those guys who beat up Jonah Jameson. And one of my favorite things is when he hits them. It has that flashback to him as like young Spider-Man for the first time, and that is one of that was the first time I ever saw that in anything, like, and I thought that was the coolest shit because again, you're bridging the gap of like first day Spider-Man, most recent Spider-Man, in his 50s, and that for me was I don't know when I've read that years ago, but just that was one of the things that kind of opened my idea to a different way of storytelling of that that punch that kind of awoke Spider-Man as
that reverberates through his career.
That young man again. That was one of the coolest things.
Yeah, I've always enjoyed jumping around in timelines, and I've always enjoyed whether that happens in a book or a movie or a comic book or whatever. Like I like that idea of playing with timelines, especially with the character. So in Renato Jones, I often flash back to him as a child. In Iron Fist, I would flash back to him as a child because for me, the storytelling is not necessarily a linear experience. It is a beginning and a middle and an end. But how you get there, there's 1,000 ways to do it, and I love looking for opportunities to try bringing clashing moments together, especially moments that inform the core of the character. Like I love reinvestigating and reinvesting in the core of a character, whether it's Spider-Man or Iron Fist or even if it's a new character like Renato Jones. I just like to dig into that. Who is that? What's the essence of that person? And play with the visuals and it's fun. It's really fun for me to do that stuff.
Now, Kaare, something we ask everybody that comes on the show: what are you currently geeking out over?
Oh man, that's a big question. I don't know, everything. It's a weird time. There's so much content being generated in so many mediums. What a weird time. So many more movies being made now than ever before. Less getting to theaters, but more getting made than ever before in the history of filmmaking. More television being generated than probably ever in history. Probably more comic book titles available than ever in history. Probably more content. I'm like deep down the podcast thing. I love podcasts and listen to tons of them. It's weird. I mean, in a way, it's hard because not only do you have all this new stuff, more new stuff than ever there was new stuff before in the history of stuff, but you also now have a archived catalog of works in books, film, comics, TV available at the internet. It's like what a weird time to try to generate content when you're competing with not just the best of today, but the best of ever. It's I often battle with like, what does that mean? And at what point does just culture, which is now obsessed with pop culture, but even so, it feels super saturated. And at what point does pop culture itself become oversaturated? And how does that end? How does that story end? I don't know. But I love for TV. I've really enjoyed Walking Dead, Westworld, Mr. Robot. Films. I probably watch less films than I ever have before in my life, and that's strange, and that's part of why I started directing TV this year. But I loved Mad Max and comic books, Black Science. There's so much stuff. Like there's just so much stuff. I feel like I'm drowning in content.
I mean, it's an embarrassment of riches these days. I mean, I think it was Mark Waid that once said that it's kind of intimidating knowing that there's more content out there, like almost being generated annually, than we will have time for in our entire lives.
Yeah. It's weird. It's a weird time, man. So much stuff is being generated. Like so much stuff. In Vancouver, when I was directing, I directed this TV show called Aftermath over the summer, late summer. And while I was doing that, there were 60 concurrent television productions being filmed in Vancouver. And that's just TV, and that's just Vancouver. There was 60. So it was hard to get crew and hard to get locations. Like everyone was shooting everywhere and everyone was working, and it made it a bit challenging, but like that's just crazy,
Yeah, all the CW stuff films up there, right?
Yeah, we got Flash, Arrow, Legends of Tomorrow, totally. But also it's just so much stuff in general. A lot of production in Vancouver.
How is working? I mean, you mentioned working in TV and all that sort of thing, and working on Aftermath. How's that been? You were kind of alluding or hinting that it's really picked up within the past year for you.
Well, I found myself just watching less movies and becoming a little disillusioned with the medium in a weird way that I didn't want to admit to myself. Like I just had. Those movies that I used to love watching, they were getting harder and harder to find. And I would find myself watching Netflix and just queuing the movie that I want to watch and then watching the series that I wanted to watch. It was like I just started watching a lot more television. And I had to talk with my agent, and I was like, I think I want to explore this. And I was offered a few opportunities this year, and I was very hesitant because in the film world, when you're the director, you're like the quote unquote, the boss. Like you get to. I mean, it's kind of a falsehood, but it's also kind of true. Like you get to be the boss and direct the film and make a lot of those decisions that need to get made. But in TV, like you're maybe one of 5 directors on a series, and they rotate you in and out. And that show gets made without you, and then you step in, and then you finish, and then it continues. And when you're a film director, you're always told that TV directors their only goal is to be asked back. And it's like, what? That is like the worst. Like when you do something because you love it and you want to make art or whatever, the most disempowering thing you could ever be told would be like, your only goal is to just get the next job. Like, what does that mean? And I felt like I wanted to try it. And when I tried it, I realized even though people in the production I was working on would tell me the same thing, that it wasn't true at all. I also did a show for Disney called Mech X4, which is kind of like Pacific Rim for kids. And I found myself on both Aftermath and Mech X4. Like, I was able to use a lot of my skills and go beyond maybe the ordinary TV directing situation. I was designing props. I was designing sets. Like the things I would do in a feature film, I was kind of quote unquote allowed to do and allowed to bring to the table. I had the ability and I could do it, and it was appreciated. All these productions are running behind, and there's never enough time, and I'm good at what I do. So I could give some answers and people really appreciated it. And I found like, I could really use almost all of my filmmaking muscles, and just as long as as long as you're good, do them and use them and offer them to the show. And it was very fulfilling. And I also had, I can also do a lot of visual effects stuff just because I know how. And so in both shows, I had quite a few finished visual effects shots that I just did in the editing room. I just contributed because I could do them. And so I found a way to turn that TV directing experience into something that was completely fulfilling. And in many ways, it felt like penciling comic books. Like if you're penciling a book, you get a script from a writer, you bust your butt doing your best and hopefully doing things only you can do in the pencils, and then you hand it off and the inker inks it and the colors it. And it felt really close to that, and I felt like it felt really natural and fun and inviting, and I found a way to love it.
That's cool. I mean, just kind of like seeing those skills, those transferable skills, kind of transpose. Now, Kaare, to take us out, is there anything you wanna plug or promote other than Renato Jones?
Well, I'm also writing Iron Fists, plural, from Marvel right now. That should hit, I don't know when, maybe summer. A really cool artist named Afu Chan is drawing it. It's a continuation of Danny Rand and his little pupil Pei from Iron Fist: The Living Weapon.
Right.
And so that's been a lot of fun. I think it's going to, I often just can't help but zig when people want me to zag. So it's going to be a little different than The Living Weapon, even though it is almost the continuation of that series. It's much different in many ways, and I think it's going to be fun, and I hope people like it. Doing that, I just started Renato Jones season 2. That's going to be really fun and exciting and aggressive. And the Black Sinister for Dark Horse Presents is just wrapping up. I think chapter 6. I've looked at the color proofs last week. That'll come out soon, and then that will be collected into a kind of a mini trade through Dark Horse. Those are my big projects. I just signed on to direct a little more television this year. I don't think I can talk about it yet, but it's a really cool show with big effects in a post-apocalyptic world, and really kind of action. It's a cool show. So I'll probably do more of that. And then I have these films that could happen at any time that I've been working on. So that's kind of where I am right now.
I feel like between 3 books, television, and perspective film, you are living to your own mission statement in the foreword. You are making art to fight entropy.
Yeah. The only thing I would love to do that I haven't done yet, there's 2 things really. One is I would love to design some toys, make some toys. And I would love to be involved in a video game. those are my. If I can do those things, and it would be great to do those things on one of the characters that I've created. That would round out my and fulfill the dreams that I had as a child when it was all one thing. When toys and comics and video games and cartoons were all one thing. If I can just do that, I think I will have. Send a message back out to the universe that these aren't different things, and there's a way to do them all, and just be one person.
I would totally play a Renato Jones video game while being surrounded by Renato Jones action figures and statues.
Let's get. Yeah, we got to talk to Todd about that.
Yeah.
But all right, well, Kaare, thanks again for coming on the show, and again to all our listeners at home, the first volume of Renato Jones is out in store comic book shops now and in bookstores on Tuesday, January 17th. Kaare, thanks again.
Thank you. Yeah, just in time for the inauguration of the new president-elect.
That's right.
Boy.
Yeah.
Lovely chat.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it was a fun one.
Yeah, and again, Renato Jones 1% is out in comic book shops and on Comixology now. And you can read all of his run on Iron Fist: Living Weapon and Spider-Man Reign. Was that your primer into the wide world of Kaare Andrews as well?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that moment I talked about is like legitimately one of my favorite Spider-Man moments of all time. And I really love, we talked about it too with the forward he has to Renato Jones, the 1%. Which I loved as well, but his ideas and his his passion for creativity and being creative. I really that's
making good art.
That's palpable. Just talking to him, you could feel that rang true. It wasn't just a nice little blurb he wrote in the beginning of the book. It's it's he means it.
It's a battle cry.
Yeah, no,
a mission statement.
I like it a lot. Yeah,
but yeah, you guys getting anything interesting at all?
I finally watched the pilot for the Amazon Tick series, the new live action series that they're doing. I was just really bored, and I was sifting through what is on my watch list on Amazon, and it was there, and I was like, oh, okay, I'll check it out. See how far into the series I can get. Didn't realize it was still just the pilot episode. I thought they had already done a whole season. Turns out they did get a full season order. Comes out this year sometime. They haven't even announced a specific date, but it was weird. Partially because it's supposed to be weird. It's the Tick. Anyone that knows the Tick knows that it doesn't make sense and is crazy, and so therefore I should enjoy it. But as in terms of the Tick, for me, it's Patrick Warburton, and it's weird seeing someone else be the Tick. Granted, it is what's his name from
Peter Serafinowicz.
Yes, from Guardians of the Galaxy, Spaced. He is the voice of Darth Maul in Episode 1. Great actor, love him, but it's weird seeing him as the Tick because in comparison, he's such a small guy. Because to me, Tick is supposed to be huge, and Patrick Warburton, while not being like the 3 foot wide shoulders like the cartoon version would have, still had that bigger figure, and that was probably the thing that set me off the most. One interesting thing that I feel like I picked up on, and I'm not sure if it's intentional or if it was just something that I read into, but I would love for it to be something, is that it seems like they're playing with the idea that maybe the Tick is a manifestation of Arthur's subconscious, that he's actually the crazy one. Because his character had a funky trauma as a child, and is now deals with an intense obsessive compulsive disorder, and also apparently has a tendency to if I remember correctly, hallucinate. So I was like, oh well, maybe the Tick is a hallucination.
Cool. Jake.
I like the Tick. He's great. I like the animated series best.
Yeah,
it's a lot of fun, and the comic's fucking out of its mind, and that's a deconstruction in an insane way of a superhero. From the first panel with him, I feel like he's kind of really evolved with the show. Whether it's animated, whether it's the 8 episode Patrick Warburton one, or it's this one. There's they can pretty much do whatever they want with him.
Yeah.
Because he is a Boston-born character in terms of creator-wise, but which is cool. I have yet to actually watch. I've seen some clips of the Tick, but I want to support it when it comes out because
it's only
fun.
If I remember correctly, it's only
it's
a
only
half hour long.
Okay, yeah.
At least it was quick, so it felt like it was only a half hour long. So if it was in fact an hour, then I'm like, oh, good pacing.
Yeah, I think he was originally a mascot for a comic company.
Yeah, he was. After watching it, I watched through an origins of the Tick episode, and yeah, he was much like Ernest from the Ernest Does This series. He started out as a mascot.
Ernest Does Dallas.
Yeah.
Watch it.
Yeah,
but I like that the mask is kind of more of the classic mask.
Yeah, that was one thing that bothered me with the Patrick Warburton, was that it was an open face mask.
Yeah.
So I was like, who do you think you are? Robert Downey Jr.?
Yeah. Also, though, in the comic, he can't take off his outfit.
Yeah.
So his alter ego, he just wears a necktie.
Shirt and tie, yeah.
Just a tie around his...
does he have the... I forget. Does he have he has the short sleeve office shirt, doesn't he?
Not the ones I've been reading. It's just a tie.
From what I saw, I've only ever seen him with just a tie.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think.
Although I now that you've put that Now that you've incepted
I'm
that
sure
into
he's
my
I'm
mind.
sure he's done that down the line. I just
maybe,
remember
maybe in the cartoon series or something like
I
that.
just remember there's a moment where he's wearing his tie and he bumps into Clark Kent and
Yeah.
Clark Kent's glasses fall off and he's like fuck. And
Yeah.
so the Tick does the thing where you like flip your eyes, your shit around here, so you have like the Elton John glasses with your own thumbs and fingers.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
For me, that's like my only real exposure to the Tick is the Fox animated series.
Right.
So
That's a fun one. But no, I've been thinking about because it's a new year. I don't think we talked about this. We just talked about our top 10. Do you have an most anticipated movie this year? Because it's funny. I feel like whenever we do this, we're always like this, and then it's usually by the end of the year not that movie whatsoever because it's like there's something better or whatever.
yeah, I mean, I didn't see La La Land or Hell or High Water coming this
Mhm.
time.
Yeah,
like last
same.
year. It was. I want to say it was like over the summer that I first heard that about it.
I remember hearing like the name La La Land and Emma Stone and Ryan Gosling. I was like, oh shit, and the director of Whiplash. I was like, oh shit.
Yeah.
And then I didn't see the trailer until like Edge of 17. Like I
wow.
I kind of was like I almost want to go in cold, and then I saw it and I was like I'm glad I saw the trailer because I know this is definitely up my alley. And Hell or High Water I didn't know about till you said something about that.
That was something that I want to say it came out of like South by Southwest, which is
Probably,
like
yeah,
in
I mean,
like March.
Yeah.
But even then, everything goes through South by Southwest or Telluride or all that.
And Sing Street was something that I just saw a trailer for. I wasn't like that wasn't on my radar.
You know what? I'm glad that that movie Split comes out on Friday, so I don't have to see that trailer anymore.
Same. Although it's supposedly getting pretty good reviews.
Well,
but like yeah, the
I still am interested in seeing it, but I'm not like
I expect a full
stoked.
report.
It was hilarious.
Yeah, it could be. Who
It could-
knows?
Who knows?
It's got. My name's Hedwig. I have
Hedwig.
socks.
No, like it's definitely one of those things that I'm like, if I don't get a chance to see it in theaters, like I have no problem waiting for it to come out on video.
Yeah, they said I was curious. I was curious to see if it was
Yeah.
going to get lambasted, just destroyed. Because Sam and I have seen that trailer so many goddamn times.
You know, it did get like lambasted / destroyed.
But
Bye, man.
oh yeah.
I don't think anyone's surprised by that.
Yeah. But actually, I was surprised
Although
that
it
I
does
was
have Doug Jones.
reading the reviews of Split, and they were like, M. Night Shyamalan's getting back on track. Like this is something that he needs. I was like, oh, I mean that's good, I guess.
Fine.
I like James McAvoy. I don't want him to like
M. Night
crash and
Shyamalan
burn.
does 10 Cloverfield Lane.
Yeah. With the Beast Man. I just hope he turns into a straight up beast in the end. That's what I want to happen.
Yeah.
Because they have like those drawings of like Chewbacca.
Yeah. And they're like, people with split personalities can change their body chemistry. And he's like, ah.
he's just taking a shit. He's like, yeah.
And so he turns into like a fucking
I hope,
Tyrannosaurus.
dude. I hope. Yeah.
Not a Tyrannosaurus Rex. Not like King of the Tyrannosaurs.
No.
Yeah.
Just a Tyrannosaurus.
Just a Tyrannosaur.
Yeah.
But no, the reason I hope brought this up is because someone had asked me that earlier, and I totally forgot to mention this movie, Logan. Like that's a movie that I'm not gonna say that's my number one, but that's one that supposedly the last trailer comes out on Thursday, and I love Hugh Jackman.
Mm-hmm.
I love Wolverine,
Mm-hmm.
but for me, there hasn't been like that knockout, drag out like Wolverine movie, and I don't mean that like necessarily physically, like we see him do that, but I really want this to be like awesome because I feel like it's all there, but we've been burned by trailers before, which is why I'm not talking about Justice League or Wonder Woman. I'm just when it comes out, I'll see it. The DC stuff I've been giving it 3 chances. With that, and the trailer may look fine, but no, I don't want to get fooled by that shit anymore. It's too much crap to deal with.
Logan comes out the same day as the Nintendo Switch.
Oh.
Well,
March 3rd.
I will be seeing Logan and not buying that.
If I had to make the guess, I would say probably Blade Runner. The new Blade Runner is probably
2049. The trailer looks pretty good. Hopefully, there's a dance number between Gosling and Harrison Ford.
Yeah.
Stuck in Traffic in 2049.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still like a little iffy on Alien Covenant.
Which, oddly enough, was what I was going to say is the one that I'm.
Is it?
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Although a huge fan of the Blade Runner mythos, I'm still kind of on the fence with it because I'm like, yeah, that trailer, like the 30 seconds of anything that we see looks pretty, but like it's just sand and the Goss walking into a building.
Yeah.
So I was like,
Art house.
old Harrison Ford, like Okay.
Filming in his house,
Yeah.
probably.
Yeah.
Someone was saying like he's going to remember all of his characters if he just film it in his house. Well, of course, episode 8. I mean, that goes without saying.
Yeah, and I'm still surprised they've kept the lid on what it's.
Yeah, I mean,
called.
I know. Adam Driver had said, he once wishes movie would just come out. And Star Wars is a movie where that could, it's not. I don't think it's gonna happen, but they could do that, and not spend money on, because everyone's gonna see it no matter what.
Yeah.
And could you imagine if they did that? I remember Mark Hamill posted like the Roman numeral V111, and it was like, here's your first sneak peek at episode 8, and people were like, fuck, even though it's just, we know it's 8, but
They used Roman numerals.
I'd be all for it, but of course, you got to be the first person to jump in line to watch a trailer, for it. But because again, it's just a lot of questions to be answered, hopefully, or more questions to be put on top of the questions, whatever.
Yeah.
But that one's cool. Thor Ragnarok sounds pretty cool too. I mean, supposedly Hulk shit's going down.
Yeah, I mean, there's that. The other 2 Marvel movies, Spider-Man: Homecoming and Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2.
Yeah.
So it should be nice.
Yeah, I think the standard superhero fare, that we see every year. There's some good ones. There's some terrible ones.
I think it's gonna probably be split along party lines again.
Yeah, I hope there's no like.
My Bob Hope.
I hope there's no X-Men Apocalypse type superhero movie that I see.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I forgot. I keep forgetting that exists.
You should. I'd like to.
Yeah.
I'd like to forget that we saw that. Did we see that opening night?
We did.
Mhm.
I
You
think
guys-
you saw it because I think you're still working at the theater
Yeah.
at that point.
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh, and I was working at the bar at the same time, so I wouldn't have been able to
Yeah.
watch it opening night.
Yeah,
it was horrible.
Yeah.
it was horrendous.
Yep.
But yeah, no, I would say it's even if Blade Runner 2049 is just a feast for the eyes, then it's a feast.
Yeah.
For
I mean,
the eyes.
it's Ridley Scott, so it's
So
right.
it's Alien Covenant.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
I love.
but it isn't actually. It's the guy
Or
that
is it just produced? Ridley
Produced,
Scott?
yeah.
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Ridley Scott was busy doing Alien Covenant.
Oddly enough.
Yeah. So it's the guy that did Arrival.
Yeah.
And
Oh, well, that was still pretty.
Yeah,
Oh, it
and-
was very And I love Ridley Scott. I mean, just, I don't know, something. We'll see the Alien Covenant, but
Oh, I don't think Damon Lindelof is like writing this one.
well, I
which
mean, that
was,
would be
like
smart move number
yeah,
one.
which was my big. I loved the way Prometheus starts,
Mm-hmm.
but when I didn't like the hemming and hawing of it being like, oh, it's not really an Alien prequel.
Yeah.
And
It's
at the
just
end,
like,
it's like here's a shit monster that looks kind of like a xenomorph, and
Yeah.
you're like, question mark? That's the end of the movie,
Yeah.
and you're like, God damn it.
yeah,
Hopefully, this will be a nice companion to Prometheus to be like. We know that the Prometheus started out as like the explanation of where the xenomorph alien came from, but here's something that bridges that gap that David Lindelof.
Here's what it
gave.
really was supposed
Yeah.
to be.
yeah.
Yeah, it'd be like James Cameron's Alien 3,
Yeah.
which supposedly he is working on.
Oh, he is
Yeah. Well, what was it last year? Not this
like 2015.
2015 Awesome Con when I met
Michael Biehn.
Michael Biehn. According to him, he had been approached by Cameron's people to come back and reprise
Wasn't
his
it?
role.
Wasn't it Neil Blomkamp?
Yeah, I think it was.
Yeah, he was tagged to like actually be the director.
Yeah.
yeah,
Mhm.
Yeah.
but like it's still like
produced by
and thumbs up from James Cameron.
kind of like Terminator Salvation, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah, or Genesis.
Genesis, that's what it was. I'm getting all my
Or
shitty
like
sequels.
Blade Runner 2014.
yeah, in this case.
Well, so yeah, supposedly that Alien movie's on the back burner.
Yeah,
So for Covenant.
That's I'm kind of okay with that. As much as I loved Aliens and would have liked to see that actual sequel, the sequel that could have been, like it was already kind of in the Alien story mythos to like just kind of go off the rails and go a completely different direction for the sequel. I mean, James Cameron was the one that introduced that idea by making a war film, kind of the combat film.
Mm.
It's less of a horror movie. I mean, there's still horror elements, but
Yeah.
yeah. Okay. Yeah. You guys getting anything else? Anything at all?
No.
I on the same night that I watched The Tick, which apparently I have a tick while I'm trying to think of the word "the tick" or the phrase. I also watched a 2014 movie called The Voices, just on a whim because on the cover was Ryan Reynolds sitting there like with a dog, and I was like, oh, he's crazy, and here's dogs talk. Cool, let me check this out. But it was like, there's also like all kinds of like blood in the like graphic design of everything. So I was like, is it like he kills people because the dogs tell him to, like a Son of Sam kind of situation? And I was actually very surprised to find out how much I enjoyed the movie. It was naturally it's pretty silly because Ryan Reynolds is in it and it's got talking animals, and I was right. He hears voices and he attributes them to his dog and cat. And starts out, he accidentally kills this girl that he goes on a date with, and then he starts hearing her voice, coming from her head that he ends up keeping in his refrigerator. And then through that, she's like, I need a friend, so he kills another person, and then you basically becomes a serial killer, and hilarity ensues. But just as surprised that I was to enjoy it, I also was surprised to find out that Anna Kendrick was also in it. And through watching it, I was like, oh, she totally talked about how awkward it was to do these romantic scenes with him in her book, Scrappy Little Nobody. But without saying, like, she was like, oh yeah, I had to do a scene in this little indie movie that I was in with someone who is now like a Hollywood heartthrob, but he wasn't, he was still kind of small potatoes at the time. I guess he wasn't. Ryan Reynolds probably wasn't really small potatoes in 2014, but
he was in a valley.
Yeah,
he was not a
yeah. I guess that was shortly after The Proposal, or
well, no, there was the 1-2 punch of like Green Lantern and just like all these movies, all these major label movies that just like sunk his career for the longest time.
Yeah. It was fun because like there's a scene where he is talking about how like hard it was dealing with his mother's death, and like he's in his childhood house, and then like just out of nowhere, like their characters, they're on like a date, and it's in the middle of the movie, and he's talking about how hard it was dealing with that, and then she just like leans in and kisses him, and like as the audience, I'm like, why the fuck would you do that? And then while I'm saying that, I remember the passage in the book where she was like, neither of us could figure out the proper motivation for why I would lean in and kiss, but the director was adamant that it happened. And we were like, so I was like, oh, I totally know the movie that she was talking about now, and it was fun.
And hilarity ensued.
Fun for the whole family.
Yup.
Well, on that note,
I'm also looking forward to Twin Peaks. It comes out this year.
Yeah.
Yay.
Yeah. Christmas happens on December 25th.
It does.
I
have a birthday this year, guys.
Yeah. You just gotta hold out. The big 3-1 for me and John Frederick over here.
John Jake the Snake.
Yeah.
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 But yeah. So I guess it's just been a low key. Kaare Andrews is the highlight.
Sometimes shit doesn't happen. Just working and working.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Flynn, am I still to create the perfect system? Yeah.
I saw your tweet about that, and I watched I Fight for the Users, and I was like, fuck this. Why do I care about this? Like, I was like, I'm going to get emotional this time. And I watched it, and I was like, why the fuck did I... It was a one in a lifetime.
It has to be, I think, in the context of it. Like, I get emotional at the end of the movie where, like, he confronts Clue and all those emotions kind of come out. He's like, I did everything you asked for.
That's where I get emotional in the movie, too.
Yeah, and he's just like, I made created the perfect system. And he's like, that's the thing about perfection. It's unknowable, and yet it's around us all the time. And I'm always like, oh. And I saw that because I watched it with John over the weekend, and he was just like, good call on the Tron Legacy. And I was like, I know, man. I know.
I bought that solely because Daft Punk was in it for 10 seconds and does the soundtrack.
Yeah.
Even though it's my least favorite thing Daft Punk's ever done. And I remember watching the movie and I was like, this is fucking cool, man. Like, really cool. And for some reason, I fight for the users. I was like, oh shit. Like, I got like teary eyed. And then I didn't even think about that again until we started talking about it years ago, And then I was like, let's watch that scene. Because I can, pop on, Superman, like that scene, and get emotional watching it on YouTube on a fucking, phone screen. I can watch
Field of Dreams.
Where are the rockets?
Yeah, Field of Dreams. I could the scene with Lothar. Where's what? Where's what? The rocket.
Sorry, the way that you said Superman reminded me of him.
But I could watch the scene in E.T. where the kids take off before the walkie-talkie FBI rifleman. And
whatever. I got it on Laserdisc. They got guns.
Oh, I mean, I got the DVD. The great thing about the special DVD when they came out, it came out with both versions. Just like Close Encounters came out with the 3 versions.
Just like my Blade Runner has 5 versions.
Yeah, seriously. I remember seeing that final cut in theaters, and it was awesome. But I drove like an hour and a half away with my buddy, best good friend Kev. But yeah, I remember watching, and I recently again watched the I Fight for the Users, and I was like, what? I don't know what it was. I mean, I think it's like I'm a sucker for that like good girl gone bad moment. It's the moment where like he decides to
he remembers who he is.
Yeah, remembers who he is, and he kills the Emperor Palpatine.
Tries,
but it's also not Emperor Palpatine.
Yeah,
but yeah, I don't know why. Like, it caught me on a good day, I guess,
or a bad one.
Yeah.
I remember that scene, like seeing it in the movie theater. I had a very opposite reaction to it. Because like the when he was just like, I fight for the users, I was just like, what? In the context of the movie, I was like, I feel like I'm supposed to feel something, but I don't.
Yeah, it did it that 1 second. I was like, yeah. And then I guess I'd have it on DVD somewhere. I've never, and Sam's probably right. Watching it in context, but so many of these other moments that like latch on to my soul when I watch it. I could watch The End of the Natural, but for some reason, that moment got me for that one time, I guess. And that's probably happened more often than not. That's the one
I think for me, it's because while as the audience, I thought that they spent right. Who would have thought? I felt like the movie was spending the entire time trying to be like, this isn't Tron, this is somebody else. And I'm like, he has a fucking glowing T on his chest. And then like he yells out, I fight for the users, was supposed to be like the big reveal, like, haha, it was Tron the whole time. And I was like, I fucking knew it. It was obvious.
They straight up
do they
call him Tron like multiple times before. So, thanks again for Kaare Andrews for coming on the show. Again, Renato Jones, 1% is available in comic shops everywhere and on Comixology. Yeah, it's been another installment of Catching Up. I'm Sam.
I'm Chris.
I'm Jake. Thank you very much.
Good night, Arabon.
Fried chicken. This has been another Geek Out production. If you enjoyed what you heard, hey, we've got a special episode every Friday. Of course, there's the usual Catching Up show every Wednesday. And you get book club episodes just about every Tuesday these days. Thanks for listening.